Alright, so before we get started with our first project, I just want to briefly outline what HTML5 is and what it gives us as far as both display and functionality. So the main new features with HTML5 are structural elements and attributes, so basically semantics and how we structure our pages. There's a whole bunch of new tags that we can use where previously we would have to use divs with classes and IDs. We can now use even more specific tags to surround our content. There is also a lot of new attributes. Media elements, we have the video and audio tags now, so we can easily embed media into our web pages. Form types, and some of these types have validation like email, telephone number fields, and so forth. And I'm going to go over the specifics of each of these features in this slide presentation. 2D and 3D graphics and animation. Now, a lot of the new features with HTML5 they rely heavily on JavaScript. Okay, so you can't create graphics and animate them with strictly HTML. You need to have JavaScript along with that. Okay, so it has its own APIs. Geolocation is another one that needs JavaScript. You can use the Get Current Position API, which allows you to capture your user's location as long as they allow you to. You'll get a pop-up that will ask if you can grab their location, and they can either refuse it or accept it. Local storage and local SQL storage are basically ways that you can save data on the user's computer or browser. And that works kind of like JavaScript cookies work, except it's faster. You can store more data. It's just better. In SQL storage, you can actually have kind of an SQL database locally, and you can have different fields and so forth. Alright, so let's go through some of these changes. The first noticeable change on a web page, which differs from past HTML or even XHTML, is the doc type. And you can see the HTML 4.0.1 doc type is pretty long. We have this DTD, transitional or strict. You could have transitional or strict. The language, and then we have this link to the W3 website. And then the XHTML doc type is pretty much the same thing, which is really long. HTML5, however, uses just this, okay, and that's used to validate your HTML. And it's much looser than XHTML. You don't need to have, for instance, you don't need to have the slash on tags that don't have an ending tag, and you can still use. You can use this doc type and it will still validate your XHTML. You can still use those slashes or any part of XHTML. You can still use that while using an HTML5 doc type. Alright, so one of the most noticed changes when you look at an HTML5 document is the semantic structure or the markup. In the past, we would always have to use div tags to describe something. We'd have div with an ID of header or footer, and now we have these these tags that describe your content much better without even having to use a div. And of course, you could still use classes and IDs on any of these. And there's actually a lot more, but these are the most common ones. We have the header, which is pretty obvious. That would be probably at the top of your website with your logo or your heading, things like that. Footer is obviously a footer at the bottom where your copyright goes, where you may have a secondary menu. Main can be used for a lot of different things. I use it as kind of a container for all my content. Section is more for separate smaller pieces of content. A side is mostly used for sidebars, basically your sub content. And then article can be used, for instance, in a blog. You could have the post wrapped in an article tag. All right, and there's much more of these. I suggest going on the W3C website and checking out all of the elements that are available. So we have new form elements and new form types. All right, so some of these even have validation without needing JavaScript. For instance, email. If you label an input field with the type of email and you don't put a valid email address in it, and then you click send, it's going to give you a little pop-up that says this isn't a valid email address. And you don't need to include any JavaScript for that. Alright, so that's really nice. We also have date and date time input fields, color, which gives us a hexadecimal color picker, a number, month, a number range, a search input type, telephone number, time, URL, and week. Okay, so these are all new HTML5 form elements. So with HTML5, we can actually display videos and audio without having to use a third-party plugin like Adobe Flash. That's what we would have to do in the past with HTML4. And you can also, of course, embed videos with your YouTube code or whatever, but HTML5 allows you to do that without having to use YouTube. Maybe it's a video that you want to be private. Maybe your customers need to pay to watch it. Obviously, if that's the case, you don't want to put the video on YouTube. Geolocation is another great feature of HTML5, but it does include JavaScript. You need to use either JavaScript or another language that uses the API. And what it does is it prompts the user to either allow or refuse the script from getting their location. Okay, so they'll get a pop-up and they can easily refuse it, so it's not intrusive. And what we do is use the get current position API. Alright, so that what it will do is it will grab the user's latitude and longitude, and then you can do what you want with that data. You can actually get the city they're in, the state, whatever, which is really helpful, especially in like directory-based websites where you're searching for something that is local, is close to you. So graphics, again, we need to rely on JavaScript to use the graphic features. One of the features is the canvas element, which is used to draw and paint graphics. You can also use it for animation. And canvas can be used to create very simple shapes as well as complex objects, and you can also use photos or images as well. SVG, which stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, can be used to define vector-based graphics, and this is done in XML format. Alright, so you can create graphics that no matter how much you zoom or zoom out, the quality stays the same, just like any other vector graphic. Let's see, so lastly we have HTML5 storage. Like I said, works kind of like JavaScript cookies, but much easier, stores more data, is faster, so I would definitely suggest using this over cookies. We have basically the local storage API. It allows you to store basically key value pairs onto the user's machine, and that will basically stay there until they manually delete the data, till they clear it. And the session storage API actually does the same exact thing, except that the data is deleted as soon as the browser is closed or the session has ended. Alright, so that's the only difference really. And then we have web storage, which basically allows us to have an SQL kind of database that's stored locally. Alright, so that can be very helpful as well. Alright, so those are the main features of HTML5, and of course you do need some JavaScript with some of these features. And we will be going over we'll be going over pretty much all of them from within the projects that we have in this course. So I look forward to starting the first project.